Hey everybody, welcome to the Jess and John pod. I'm Jess,
And I'm John. Hi.
and I have a surprise for us this episode. I thought it would be fun if we put on our pajamas, we grab a nice cup of tea, and we
Ooh.
browse through this I always say Time magazine, Life magazine from 1939,
Oh,
where the big
yeah.
feature is the rise of fascism in America.
Oh, that's what we need right there. Did you go in the Wayback Machine for this?
So I call them my Iowa mom and dad. They're like a second set of parents, and they found this in their basement and they gave it to me because I was like taking pictures with my cell phone. I was like, this is incredible. And they're like, just take it. And so thank you to Sue and Morgan for this.
Listen, Jessica, you have to go to the public library and copy that right now. It's a very fragile looking very fragile looking
Falling.
document for our audio listeners.
I know. It's really lived
It
in.
looks like it got some use.
I think it got used because there's a small part of this where they talk about Iowa. It's like one page, and I think that's why it was kept, is because they mentioned Iowa. It was not kept for the fascism stuff.
Listen, we don't have a lot of time here. Are there any bookmarks, highlights, dog ears?
Yes. So,
Incredible.
where should we begin? Um, Basically, there was like a Nazi rally in New York. You may have heard about this. People have revisited it. It was in Madison Square Garden.
Oh my goodness, that is a large centerfold of a very fascist rally, it appears.
Yes. And I wanted to read this little part. So there was a man, Isidore Greenbaum. I don't know what, I didn't Google him. I don't know what his significance is, other than the fact that there were some counter protesters at this Nazi rally, naturally. And Greenbaum, fighting furiously, shouted, "Down with Hitler." Police finally arrived, dragged stormtroopers off Greenbaum, and took him to court. The next day, he was released after he was fined for disturbing the peace. And so the headline here is "It Can Happen Here." And the main thing they're writing about, and I find this very interesting, is that a person that was streaking at the Nazi rally. That
I
sounds like
mean,
you don't
hey,
want to
I
do.
think that's very
Um,
2025. We need to revive that.
but the guy shrieking "Down with Hitler," counter protesting, is arrested while all these fascists are hanging out in Madison Square saying Nazi shit. And the one person that's screaming "Down with Hitler" is arrested for disturbing the peace. I'm sorry, what peace? Is there peace at a Nazi rally? I find that very interesting.
Let's just keep an eye out for that activity. It seems like something that's, kind of relevant. Maybe file it away in the old brain there just in case it becomes useful.
Yeah. There's more. These are men to watch, and it's some of the voices of hate.
Is that my
People.
cousin? I'm kidding. Continue.
I was like, is it? Is he joking? Okay, so these are people that were like the fascists in America. Fascism in America continued. I found this a little interesting. So it says, I'll start at the beginning. On these pages, you see some of the non-Germans, including publishers of some of the propaganda shown on the previous pages, which is really, you can see this article titled "Social Justice." These are
Uh-huh.
examples of anti-American propaganda that they gave. A lot of it is like very Jew-hating stuff and conspiracy theorists, blah, blah, blah. And
Got your
so
run of the mill, playing the hits.
this is back when like Nazi stuff was just called anti-American.
Yeah.
The glory days. Okay. Anyway, on these pages you see some of the non-Germans, including publishers of some of the propaganda shown on that we just showed pages before, who have won greater or less notoriety as spokesmen of the fascist sentiments in America. Nearly to a man, they deny that they're any such thing. So that sounds familiar.
Checks out. Yeah, it's not us. Pay no attention to our salutes and marches and speeches.
This next sentence, I really want people who have been paying attention to our Republican members of Congress and the things that they say. I really want you to understand this in that context. Like the Nazis of the Bund, they call themselves patriots bent on saving America from communism.
Are we still reading from the Life magazine?
We are in 1939.
Oh boy.
That one really resonated with me. But all of them stand convicted out of their own mouths of seeking to stir up among Americans the same fears and hatreds which carried Adolf Hitler to power, of inciting by interference or precept to suppression of the civil liberties which are the keystone of democracy.
Yeah, we're gonna need that. We might need to, put together some highlights here because it seems that history might be rhyming and repeating itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really
News is
crazy.
getting a little bit hairy out there.
I mean, reading this now, it's like so many people say, "Oh, well, we were fighting the same fights back in our day, and it's getting exhausting." There's this pendulum swinging in history, and honestly, reading something like this and holding this old ass magazine, I really feel that it feels crazy.
Yeah, no, it definitely is crazy. Of course, like for our jobs, we're watching what's happening and then writing about it, writing for the screen, doing whatever piece of content. But if you just line up the facts, I mean, what we saw, the world's richest man, soon to be a trillionaire, a man with business interests in every major country, who is the most influential in our country, standing on stage with the presidential seal, really hitting it, full chest twice, one for the people in the back. I mean, this guy has been supporting, he is exercising and throwing his weight around politically everywhere. One of the places that he does that is Germany, where he is supporting Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, real, honest to God Nazis. And speaking of real, honest to God ones, it seems that the far right and hate groups have been set ablaze by the richest man in the world, influential in most countries, and especially ours, throwing up a beloved symbol. So when those guys are bumping you, I think it's pretty clear. And you just can't, when you say it all and you put it together, it really is unbelievable. It's a moment we're living through.
There's so many parallels with this in the MAGA movement. This next passage, I think, is the one that I read and I was like, oh, it's happening for real this time. But it's pretty much the same thing. So they wrote the other and far more serious side of the American fascist picture, presented by the Nazi bully boys at their Bund meeting in New York. Here are no guttural voiced, hyphenated Americans, but simple folk, of the kind to be found in any American small town, depression worried about their jobs and small businesses, groping for something to fight back at a bewildering, changing world. They were easy meat for William Dudley Pelley's silver shirt organizers and propaganda. Losing their faith in democracy, they bowed to the arrogant, fascist communist assertion that America's only choice is between fascism and communism.
Oh boy. Yeah,
Oh boy.
boy. The more you read, it's like the more it sounds like today's paper.
Yeah.
I think it's like really good to be aware of these times and to kind of, take it to heart that history does repeat itself if you don't get involved and change the course of it. You know what it really like set off for me? A hot take, just another historical parallel. A lot of people have pointed it out, but these authoritarians, they're having a moment all over the world. The far right is surging everywhere. And these people get power from insecurity and fear. And this economic system that's all over the world, that's the only thing that is pumping out insecurity and fear for everybody who has to go to work. And it's pumping out profits for the owners of this, right? And these strong men, they come in, they prey on insecurity and fear. And there's usually a weak centrist opposition that's doing a very specific thing. They're clinging to politics of the past, and they're hoping that we can all just get back to normal. But I think another thing to remember in this is that the normal that centrist opposition parties want to go back to is the same one where these strong men came up and succeeded. If we're really going to address this, that means that we have to have really big power moves that shift power to people, that remove that insecurity and fear that's producing all these weird ass strong men, right? That's my hot take. I think that's a parallel that's been crawling in my mind these last couple of days.
Yeah, I remember when Bernie was doing that thing. You might remember this in 2020 because you were a political organizer too, but the New York Times editorial board was like, which candidate are we endorsing in the Democratic primary? And they sat down with all of the Democrats who were running, and Bernie's sitting there, and they ask him about Donald Trump's supporters and how Donald Trump rose to power. And we should probably add this clip in, but he says something to the effect of how demagoguery happens, that these people are fearful, these people are struggling, and he's taking advantage of that fear and turning it into anger. And that's exactly what this is describing. Led to fascism taking hold in America to some extent. While it's a good thing to point out, it was on the rise in Germany then too, obviously. It was pretty much taking hold in Germany. Here's their warships that they were already building in huge pictures on the very next page. Whoa. My magazine's like ripping. I gotta get this thing laminated. But
actually,
this idea that fucking Elon Musk is not a Nazi when he's a known white supremacist, his family was a part of the settlers in South Africa and their exploitation of resources there, and also that he's explicitly funding literal Nazis and supporting literal Nazis. It's not a joke. It's not a gimmick. And the problem is that now people see him doing that, and there are people that are susceptible to be radicalized because they're fearful, because they've been living in unbridled capitalism in America. So of course they're like, well, fucking anything else. Let's try anything else. Let's burn it down. What have we got to lose? And people like Elon doing this thing that pisses off the liberal elite of doing the siege hail sign on the stage at the inauguration and being like, oh, that's ridiculous. That wouldn't be me. I'm friends with Netanyahu. How could I possibly be a Nazi? And I think now people are going to join in and do it as a troll, as something ironic, until it's real. And we won't know how fascism took over in America because it happened as a meme at first. And I really think that's how it can happen.
Yeah, totally. And just the sinisterness, right, of like most of this being consumed and put out into the public as something as unserious as a meme, kind of gives it this Trojan horse effect where you're like, everything's a joke until, but everything has been a joke in the first part of this administration in the way that it's shaped politics since then. We've always heard it from the beginning. Oh, this is all a joke. Don't take it too seriously. Well, now the world's richest man is given the Sig Heil with the presidential seal on, so it's like the water is very hot. It started comfortable, but like, just notice that it's getting pretty hot out there. Can I do another hot take?
That's what it's for.
This is hot takes. We're in hot water, and that's the only way the takes are going to be, baby.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should step back and rethink the effect. I mean, who loves the two-party system, right? Everybody out there.
Corporate even if donors.
Yeah, exactly. That might be the only kind of people who like the system. Everybody else is going to be like, oh my God, why can't we have something else? Well, I think it's really dangerous to cling on to party politics right now, because since we do have a two-party system and it's first past the post and winner take all elections, that naturally forces us into these two choices that can't possibly represent this entire country. But it's also an easy way for the corporate donor class that you brought up, Jessica, to neatly divide us into those camps. It's like they give us red and blue boxing gloves and we beat the crap out of each other over issues that don't affect the material reality that's been degrading in our life for as long as I've been alive. So, you know, and I get this in my job all the time too, because, you know, I grew up in a conservative area, live in one now. I go out and I talk to Trump supporters. If you come at this from critiquing both parties and say, I'm just because I don't like Donald Trump doesn't mean I like the Democrats or anybody else. You can actually have a conversation. You can get really far, right? And that just shows how effective these two divisions are in cutting off anything like a sensible conversation in politics. So I think in this moment, it's pretty important to maintain independence. You know, there was a time when I'd worked for Democrats when I'd you know, spent 10 years working for Democrats. I've run as one in the past, but it is time for independence to have a moment here. I consider myself an independent just to reflect the reality that the real division is top versus bottom, not left versus right. That's my hot take.
Yeah, I think we're in a weird moment where liberals are melting down on social media, and I've been petty. I've been, unfortunately, my Twitter fingers are just so itchy, and they just need to hit the buttons.
Let
It's
those dogs
really,
bark.
oh, it's hard for me. Especially when liberals suddenly are really pissed off that Trump is in office because they think he's just so mean, and I really think that's what it is. They want to be the good guys, and you can't be the good guys when you're funding a genocide. You can't be the good guys when you're letting corporate donors control the party, and you're letting Kamala Harris's brother-in-law decide that it's not worth it to break up monopolies, and it's not worth it for working people to make enough money in their 80-hour work week to survive and provide for their family. It's really about survival. Like, working class people just want to be able to live. And apparently that's a lot to ask. Democrats believe that's a lot to ask. Republicans believe that's a lot to ask. And so I think working people are not asking anymore. They're just fighting back. And anyone who doesn't get that is irrelevant in our politics today, and we should treat them that way.
Yeah, that's the thing, because that's everyone, mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly.
And so what happens now? It's like a total transition. Like, there's no sort of like you get termed out as a political commentator or operative. That it's just you become irrelevant. We just stop listening. And so I need to stop replying to some of these people. And I'm really trying not to. But I think it was just Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and he has this famous quote where he talks about the white moderate being a larger impediment to progress than, the usual suspects, right? White supremacists, fascists. And I think a lot of liberals right now who are behind Kamala Harris are realizing that they actually are the moderates impeding progress that Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about. And instead of believing they're the problem, they're blaming everyone else. And it's a tough time right now, and we just need to stop listening to them. But I really believe that what I just said is an accurate take describing what's going on in this political moment.
Yeah, I would sign on to that as well. But, it's just like, hey, stuff is really crazy. All right. Propaganda works on everybody. You, me, anybody listening, it works on everybody. And don't assume that it doesn't. And I think right now is a great time to step back and ask, have I been played? Have we all been played? And I would say yes. And one of the ways that Trump supporters get played is they are lied to about who their candidate actually serves, who benefits from what he does. It's not them. That's how they get played. But they're not the only ones getting played. And I think that's the liberal mistake. The liberal mistake is we're not getting played here. It's these dumb idiots at the Trump rally. But the way liberals get played is exactly that, thinking that they're not the ones being played, when in reality, we fall into defense of these candidates who are, look at the leadership of the Democrats and how they haven't changed after this election. They're dying on live TV. If you're defending this at that time, you might be getting played, right? So I think it's all a good time for us to step back, see, ask how did this happen, and really consider big changes for our politics. Maybe talk about this, Jessica. Like you and I, you work for the Bernie campaign, I work for the Warren campaign. And the thing that stuck with me about that is just how far we have to go. We had to go in that campaign with voters who were on our side already, because they think that too much change is going to be an electoral risk. Well, I mean, Donald Trump just won significantly on a platform of invading Canada and getting Greenland, So it's like we have a long way to go with our own voters, and we got to kind of examine and change our minds. I don't know. Do you feel like this as a person who's worked on progressive campaigns before?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I mean, there's a big divide between what the Democratic Party says and what people say at the doors. Who in Iowa, you're asking them to caucus for Bernie Sanders at the Democratic caucus. That's what I was doing. And sometimes I would knock a door, and someone who's on my list as a potential voter who would turn out and caucus with the Democrats. And they would say, I think every immigrant should be shot when they cross the border. And, you say, I don't agree with every politician on every issue, and I'm really afraid about keeping work right now and keeping jobs in this economy. But something that is on the table, there's no candidate that's running on shoot every immigrant when they cross the border. But Bernie supports increasing Social Security. And my parents worked really hard their whole life, and I don't know if it'll be enough. And I don't think that's right. And I'm worried about what that's going to look like. So that's why I support Bernie. And he nearly broke down and touched the side of his house and said, my wife had to move away and work on a chicken farm because we're about to lose this house because Social Security is not enough. Tears in his eyes. From this big macho man, we have to shoot immigrants when they cross the border. What is the solution to this, honestly, quite racist, fearful of the other, fearful of immigrants, wanting mass deportations? The answer to that kind of thinking is literally repairing the economy so that people who work their entire lives can just get by. And I think that any party that thinks that that's too extreme and is violent and is beholden to corporations. And this idea that Democrats stand for social justice and we care for people, I'm sorry, if you think working class people deserve to suffer their entire lives so corporations can profit, you don't care about people. And so I think more people are realizing that's our political reality. It's not these stories that we're told. And is it too late? Is what I'm worried about. Because you search, Democrat on Instagram, nothing comes up. You search Free Palestine, you're not getting results for that hashtag. You comment Free Palestine, the comment's removed on TikTok suddenly because it's violating the community guidelines. So our free speech to talk about this is already being limited by a far-right government that's in control. So that's what's scary, is having the Democrats be so middle of the road and be so unwilling to be a party of working people has put us in this position.
Yeah, that's a big check for probably I would say the majority of our audience is probably coming from that direction. But look, if you're going to put people who have been dying on TV, whose first priority is to defend corporations mostly, up against this current movement, I don't think it's going to go well, and you should stop. And also, nobody should support that either. This is big stuff's happening, and time for the big response.
Yeah, and I think that's an open question. Like, what is the response? Because I'm kind of not super down for this idea that, well, no one should be allowed to talk about Nazi stuff, right? we can't be fascist in our response to fascism. We can't remove free speech and organizing in the press. I think our response is just these people are wrong and being very loud about it. And if Democrats are not using their platform to be very like frank about what's going on, that's really sad. But I think this idea that our resistance is joy is not true. I think our resistance is, doing what Greenbaum did and showing up to the Nazi thing and being like, no, Hitler sucks and you guys are crazy. Like every time you hear people talk about it, you've got to say something. And I don't think the answer is to leave Meta and to leave X and be in our little silo and never interact with people who believe these things. The only way I think we'll bring about change is having really, really hard conversations and through tough education and combating years and years of American propaganda. But I think it's possible. I
Yeah,
think it's really possible. And I
for
think
sure.
working people are already doing it. And that's why they're so afraid. And that's why the response is now you can't use the internet in the same way. You can't talk freely because this kind of stuff, this kind of independent media where we're promoting that message, I think it's been working. And I think they're really scared of it, actually.
Yeah, if the reactions to the videos that came out of the TikTok ban, if the cross cultural exchange that happened on Red Note, if the people at the FBI and the CIA watching this all unfold on the internet were, I think the lesson that they're going to take away is that there is big potential for big shifts. I mean, that's always been true throughout history, but it happens kind of right under our nose too. Like if you're old enough to remember the Republican Party when they ran Mitt Romney, or if you're old enough to remember it like before the Tea Party, in that short amount of time, so many things have happened that anybody living through it would have said were impossible, you know? So it can look like the goose is cooked right before we like uncook. How do I get out of this metaphor? Uncook the goose, you know? A lot of stuff can happen really quickly, but I do think it's, important to realize how these people get power, who usually stands in the way throughout history when they do get power, and how do you remove the fuel that they're feeding off of, and how do you get out of these, divisions where, the conversation is never about healthcare, even though it should be, right? Look at the reaction from Luigi Mangione. Yet we never talk about healthcare. We never talk, I went to Springfield, Ohio. I talked to a lot of where, a bunch of Haitian immigrants arrived to a mostly white town that had lost its manufacturing base. And, people drawing Social Security are saying like, these folks are coming over here and they're taking the money, just like the story that you shared, Jessica. And how are we all out here, right? Where nobody has enough money for Social Security, yet somebody's about to be a trillionaire, right? Those are the conversations that people across the political spectrum, they've been denied, right? But if you go out and have those conversations, big stuff can really happen. And I think we're in the moment for it.
Yeah, and there's some really like simple organizing tools that have been around since the labor movement, when the labor movement was a very scary, violent place where the government would show up and literally shoot workers who are striking.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so there's all these organizing tactics that work, and like I was employing some of them in that conversation. And if I didn't have this tool of like, okay, here's how I deal with someone who's coming at me with this stuff, and I know where it comes from politically, like I know they're actually afraid about their economic predicament as we all are, and how do I break this down? And I think I say talking to people is organizing, is defeating fascism. I really mean that. And I want anyone who like listens to our podcast to send us stories of like conversations you have, places you get stuck with family members, coworkers, friends, and like let's let this be a space where we can talk through that and how to have those conversations and what are some usual things we're hearing that are really catching people up, because while we still have it, we should be using our platforms like this for organizing. And I'm really not afraid that right wingers are going to, learn our secret recipe to change people's minds and suddenly use it. They already have billions of dollars
No, they're
supporting their
ahead on
mission, all
that.
right? I
Yeah, I
don't
think they're
think our
good.
secret tactics are going to turn things over. So it's it's something that I think should be a regular part of this show, and we've already opened our Instagram
Yeah.
up for questions. We're going to do some Q&A as well. But DM us with any conversations you've had. Share your stories, and we'll read them out and go through some of our organizing experience and impart our wisdom onto you.
Yes, I love that. I would add two things. I mean, obviously this isn't something that everybody can do because it's insanely hard. If you do find yourself in a place to run for any office, if you are reading the news and you kind of share what we've been talking about here and you're wondering why we're denied political leadership, um, of, of people saying this, if you feel that way, I think it's time to stand up and say it if you are able to do that. And, I'd be interested in talking to potential candidates or building a list. So if that's you, right into the show, I say. And the last thing I'll say, one of the things, it could get pretty bleak out there, but a thing that I hang my hat on is this crazy social experiment that we have running in the small West Virginia city of Wheeling. Ain't nothing fancy. It's a group chat with 150 close friends on it now in a city. And we're all on Signal. There's a web of chats, but the big one's got 150 in it. And that represents everybody in our community with every cross section of like skills, nurses, all of the trades, farmers, like every occupation, they're in there. And it is one of the only things that gives me a sense of calm about the future is being organized where I am on a secure platform. That makes me feel good, easy to do. I would say do it where you are.
All right, I want to read. So there was this magazine. There was also this advertisement. It's a little bit something light before we go into questions.
Oh,
So
nice.
there's a bunch of ads for this thing called Cardui, but also, am I saying that right? Because the words just spell out car DUI, which
Oh,
is interesting
nice.
because I looked up the ingredients. It's 46.6 proof alcohol.
Oh, baby, that's hooch.
This tonic, which includes potassium, salt, and alcohol, usually
Nice.
for women, um, is just getting these ladies drunk. Okay. It
Does that
says
go in a
for a
Tom
woman.
Collins or?
Right. Just have wine? I don't know.
Nice.
For a woman to enjoy her home duties and be active among her friends and neighbors, she must feel well.
Yes.
How soon homemaking seems to turn dreadful toil and what? Oh, sorry, I missed a word. Okay. How soon homemaking seems to turn to dreadful toil, and social affairs have to be given up when her health begins to run down. They describe all of these women as just like being miserable because being a housewife in 1939, I believe, was, and they just had to get drunk. Lady was weak, nervous. Her testimony: I've used Cardui for several years. I was in a change of life. I was so weak. I would feel dizzy, my head would feel light, and I was very nervous. My aunt told me about Cardui, and I sent for it. After I started taking Cardui, it was helping me. I took 6 or 8 bottles. Another woman says
You
she took.
am I to understand that you could send off through the mail for 80 proof hooch?
Yeah.
They were living in the future, damn it.
I took 7 bottles of Cardui before the birth of my first little boy.
Oh yes. Seven bottles of 80 proof to yeah, you know what? We used to be a proper country.
That's crazy. Also, the fact that car DUI, were they driving on this?
Yeah, I want to hear somebody from back in the day out in the sticks like, I got that car DUI. I'll break it out for church.
And what's funny is like one of these, I'm gonna find it. This woman was like, I just got married and then I was miserable and I didn't know what to do, so I started using Cardui and I felt better.
Ringing endorsement.
It was like getting married was really stressful to me.
You got
It's
to
like
get some of
all
that car
about
DUI.
dealing with marriage.
A lot of marriage troubles back in 1939.
I mean, yeah, you needed to get married to do anything. Also, imagine just like living with your parents and then boom, you're married. Boom, you're in some dude's house and he basically owns you. I would be drinking hooch too.
Yeah, I'd be ripping car DUI, and I wouldn't even have to live that hell.
Yep.
But big time comes in handy in the right moments. Hey, we got some questions here. Holy cow,
Let's
we
do
are
it.
living in the future. Oh, the NC chair pick. Okay, is this the first listener mailbag that we're gonna do, Jessica?
This is.
Let's get in that bag of mail. See what's in there. How often do you check your mail in your own life?
I'm actually anti mail. Um,
Hell
I
yeah.
don't like receiving it.
Yeah, me neither.
Unless it's an invitation to a party.
Send in those party invitations, but send them to Jessica because I just don't check my mail at all, and I probably have arrest warrants. So anyway, you wrote to us on the internet, and I'm gonna read this question to cop out of the first answer. And the first question is, who is your DNC chair pick? Elaborate.
I want that guy from Wisconsin. What's his name?
Ben Wickler.
I think that's who I want because my boyfriend was telling me about him, and from what I understand, he knows Midwest politics, and this guy has actually won things. That's important. We've got to
Yep.
have a track record of actually winning races because that's what a party should endeavor to do. I don't think the Democrats have lately. Um, and then I think Faz should be some kind of communications chair for them
Right on.
if they want to be a party that actually represents working people in a meaningful way and stands up to corporations. Let's see if that party's going to do a 180 or not. Um, but I'm also in this weird mindset of like, I don't care about the DNC. I don't want to pay attention to the DNC. I want to pay attention to independent candidates running. So that's where my mind's at.
Hell yeah. I'm going to pick up on the end of that and also say that I haven't been paying much attention to this race because I think there is an awesome. Let's quote Ross Perot. A little known fact about me is my favorite Ross Perot quote was about the giant sucking sound that was going to happen when we signed NAFTA. Thank you, Bill Clinton. And all of our manufacturing base got sucked out of here. Now I really got on my Ross Perot quote and I totally forgot my line of thought. Let's go back to the DNC. I think this race is taking place in the context of a party that really holds on to losing strategies and hasn't demonstrated a willingness to divert from that, really. And the power is coming from these, legacy elected members. And I just don't know how much of a DNC, of an outcome the DNC chair is going to have on this. So, I think that's a nice conversation to have for problems that were much smaller, and thus I haven't paid attention. It's a long way of saying, though, I'm going to stick with my boy Faz. Faz, shout out if you're a listener of the pod. Maybe you could send us a party invitation. Faz Shakir, Bernie Sanders campaign manager in 2020. I think, obviously I'm biased here. I work for More Perfect Union, run by Faz. I think the kind of videos and the kind of characters and the way that they're produced has given Faz an accurate understanding on the political forces we're dealing with out there and what is possible beyond what we're just offered with this current leadership. So I would want that kind of vision in there. But that said, I also, I'd kind of flip your answer, Jessica, and say Ben Wickler is a great organizer. Organizing needs to be prioritized. But more than anything, I think we need somebody who's going to go big. Yeah.
What would it take for single payer to finally hit critical mass for passage nationwide? Thank you, Headley Actual. John, what do
Yo.
you think?
Oh, man. Well, I think we went through Probably one of the biggest mile markers on the way to single payer care, if we finally get there, is going to be the reaction across the board to Luigi Mangione. We're talking about the reaction here. We're not debating any acts. That revealed that this country has been ready for it the whole time. The problem is we have an elite political class that is addicted to billionaire money and very entrenched. The opposition to the main party Republicans that are driving that is also very comfortable in their losses. They really don't lose much. The core people that run the opposition. So once we're able to get clear on that, this is part of the reason why I also am interested in independent candidates. Once the people who reacted to Luigi Mangione get clear on the fact that our political class is standing in the way, and for at least a small period of time here, we need to get together, get clear about this, and do a big reset. We might be close to that, and if that materializes, I think we'll be much, much closer.
I think we need like 5 more Luigi Mangiones, then they'll probably be ready to pass single payer healthcare.
I think that's an accurate answer, and also a hilarious joke, Jessica.
Ha ha ha! Hello, New York Police Department.
Hey,
I have no travel plans to your state. No, I really think that Elizabeth Warren put it well. Nice lady from Massachusetts. She's she said that people can only take so much, and really, I think regular working people realizing that it is a tool of corporate power to exploit our labor, to tie our employment with them to our ability to continue living. Why is healthcare something you can only access if you're gainfully employed in America? The ACA did not do a great job
yeah, it sucks.
making
I'm on it.
healthcare available, affordable. It's a little better than it used to be, but not by much, not by enough. And so I think people slowly coming to terms with the fact that corporations are exploiting us and using this as a tool. And I don't think we have time to wait for independent senators and House reps to get elected to do this. I think it's going to have to be either big pressure on the executives to the point that this is the only option, and they're afraid to keep going the way they're going, in the same way that everyday people are afraid that they're going bankrupt or they're going to have care denied and then die as a result. Like, things need to come to a head, and it might be sooner than later, because it seems the way things are going, people are very fed up. I have no intention of taking any violent actions, by the way.
Same.
I do think it seems like other Americans do. So if I was an executive, I would actually find another job and just throw my
spend a little of that money. Why don't you?
For single payer.
Yeah, I think so too. And give us some political leaders willing to talk on these lines too. We need those. Okay, here's one. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we have price controls for the basic things like food and rent that we need to survive?
There's no good reason.
Yeah.
There are bad reasons. And the bad reasons are people wanted to run an economy so that they can make as much money as possible at the expense of other people. And so human beings became the dominant species on the planet because of our ability to cooperate, to meet our basic needs for food and shelter. We started hunting together in big groups so that we could take down big game. We started eating meat. Our brains got bigger. Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, wrote about this. It's not like crazy commie ideas that human beings should have food and shelter. And the idea that, we're this powerful and strong, and especially in the wealthiest country on earth, we can't just make sure everyone has that. They want to be able to exploit us and keep us in line so that the masses stay divided and the elites can maintain their lifestyle at our expense. And it's really, really sad that they would rather live a life of leisure 24/7 than just contribute to society so that regular people aren't struggling to find food and make rent.
Man, we're really missing out on a reality show where Jeff Bezos just has to work a regular job for like a long time. Just mic him up, put a camera on him.
I want to see that.
Yeah, it would be so good. And
Not even a
also,
regular job. An Amazon fulfillment center work.
that is the ultimate. Yep, there's no other answer. And
Oh,
the other thing is, you know who price controls are really bad for? People who are only obsessed with making money. Price controls are very, very bad for them. And I have a specific example of like when these were killed, you know. Um, grew up on a farm, did an ag degree. And if you look at our ag policy and how it changed right before Reagan came along, there was a guy named Earl Butz, of all people, who was Nixon's ag guy and who killed off a system of price supports in agriculture that turbocharged driving the small farmer out, driving out farms that were diverse, that had cows, chickens, pigs, crop rotation, managing pests naturally. It broke that system that was growing our food and mimicking nature. And it broke that system so that it could sell them products that they used to get for free. When you were rotating your crops and you were rotating your cows around, you were breaking the cycle of pests that would feed on those things from them not being in the same place every year. And then we go into this corporate system that we have today on steroids, where you plant, just corn everywhere, and then you rotate out beans sometimes, but all of these fields are in corn and beans, and you're getting sold chemical inputs for them. So they had to get price controls out of there so they could break the economy that was sustaining like this Norman Rockwell version of America that we all have in places like Iowa, especially. So we don't have price controls because we're controlled by a bunch of weirdos who are antisocial and only care about becoming trillionaires. That's why. And this
another question from
deep mailbag.
Steven Swarth. Why don't big unions spend more money organizing their members
Why
and growing their
don't they?
numbers?
That's a good question. Those big unions should answer for it, really. This is a moment for organizing. I mean, they're sitting on, Citizens United flooded in corporate money. We all know this, but unions are actually sitting on really huge war chests, and they're scared because private sector density is near an all-time low. The war has been going very well. I would encourage, I think they're not spending it because they're scared, but I'll end my answer by encouraging everybody to read Hamilton Nolan, specifically this piece called Lean Into the Punch, about what big union strategy should be in this era where they're on the chopping block.
I think there are some big unions that do spend more money on organizing than others. The SEIU is not
Yeah.
a union that's talked about a lot. It's a union of service workers, right? So we're not talking big salary workers. A lot of these workers are making the minimum wage wherever they're at. But they have large memberships, and Workers United has done a hell of a job organizing at one of the biggest union busting corporations ever, Starbucks. And so I think you see stuff like that, it's very reassuring because the Starbucks union getting organized around the same time as the Amazon union led to this thing that we called hot labor summer, where
Yes.
we saw unions polling at record levels of popularity that we hadn't seen in decades.
I personally peaked in hot labor summer.
Yeah, I think that's a direct result of really good organizing directors at the SEIU deciding to spend their money. And while they may not have a lot of it, spend it on organizing. I do think there are a lot of unions that could be spending more. And
Same.
they should. Why not? I don't know. But there has been some corruption, right? Like there have been a lot of unions that were not running in a very democratic way. And we've seen the Teamsters have a big overhaul where the workers there were like, we're not doing this anymore. Like we need a president that really is with the workers and was a worker themselves. And so, the Teamsters electing Sean Fain, I think, was a really good move. And the UAW.
Yeah, UAW, yep.
It's O'Brien at the Teamsters. And so I think all of these changes in a more democratic direction at the unions is a big step towards why now they're talking about a general strike and spending more money on organizing.
Yo, mark down May Day 2028, everyone. About 6 million workers so far got their contracts aligned. Look into it. It's great. It's a real Labor Day. Another question here, deep mailbag. You ready?
Jack Ben, USA.
How do you stay positive? I feel so pessimistic that positive change can't happen. UHC, etc. Oh, misery loves company. Jack Ben, USA. It gets deep out there. But, on the one hand, what else are you going to do, right? There's a significant part of my personality that is fueled by spite and not wanting to let these bastards win. The dumbest people on earth who are also evil. It's like you be the worst, but no, you can't be the worst and be anything else. These people are the worst, and I really want to live to see the day where we just drive them out of town. So driven by that, but also, like I said, grew up in a conservative area. I talked to a lot of Trump supporters. That's been my life. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think that a lot of them, there's definitely so many people who are gone, who are past it. But I think there's more people who are out there holding on to opinions, super strong opinions, but they're holding on to them very loosely. And the only thing keeping them there is the lack of an effective opposition, really. And, you're up against a lot of propaganda. But propaganda, the things that lock in our system like gerrymandering and propaganda, those have all been built on the two-party system, right? So when you break out of that and you just say, hey, we're all people here and it's top versus bottom, not left versus right, you kind of just end run around that. And that's what I do in my job. And I discover that people have, yes, strong opinions that are terrible, but they're very loosely held. And it's because propaganda has been running unanswered forever. So maybe it's a lie to myself, but it doesn't feel like a lie. I think things can happen very quickly, and we're capable of having these conversations. And the thing you mentioned in your question, UHC, shows us that a lot of people are ready for something different.
Yeah, I think doing this podcast helps me stay positive, knowing that, our producer Gabby, you, John,
Shout out.
people like Jack are all in this thing trying to figure it out. I feel lucky to be able to do what I do every day, because I definitely had less hope when I was a bartender and was being treated like a drone that just makes drinks by every single customer. And so being able to see every single day, all day long, that we're doing the work, that Dropsite's doing good journalism in a time where it's really hard to do good journalism. And also, and this is the biggest thing, I just have a lot of faith in the working class. When
Yeah.
I knock doors, when I go out and talk to people to cover a story, and you talk for long enough, you realize that we have so much in common, and people really see the cracks in our society. And while we're pretty susceptible to the political propaganda, because it's been ingrained in us, K through 12 education is a big propagandizing tool in the United States. And our news every day that we're fed, what's on the TV, what's in our media, we're so entrenched in propaganda. But when a couple working class people get together and just start talking about stuff, it seems that we can't help but land in the same place. And I think that's really good. I think no longer is it the case that the propaganda wins out over the evidence in our everyday lives. I think the evidence is a little too overwhelming, to the contrary of what they're trying to convince us about what America is and who they are and who they fight for and how politics works. I think people really see that the economy has been rigged against us, and that's the main fight we have. And I do believe the solution won't come from this broken political system. It will come from working people fighting for each other. And it's just a matter of us spreading the good word of what's really going on. Because everyone I've had a conversation with where I'm like, hey, like, we've worked pretty hard, right? We're still not doing well. What's up with that? Who's getting rich? It's not a long conversation.
Yeah.
And it can change your entire life, just a conversation that simple. And I see it happen all the time, and that gives me hope.
I've been, for our listening audience, I've been standing at full attention in a salute for that entire monologue. It's great. Thanks, America.
Thanks, America. No, but seriously, send us your organizing stories. And I think in an episode soon, our next one, we have a special guest, but in the one after that, I think it would be fun for us to share some of our organizing tactics of like how to have these conversations with coworkers and friends. And like
Yeah.
every day, I think a goal will just be to have one. And I'll do it too. And then you can have this talk to the same people more than once, but change some people's minds and hearts.
I like it. We'll do it. Until then, everybody, get ready to
That's
gather
all.
those coworkers. Keep those eyes peeled. We don't want another 1939 here. And you take care, dear listener.
Drink your 80 proof, ladies.